Thank you, Dr. Jules. Ladies and gentlemen, in May of 2018, history was made in Barbados when that country elected its first female Prime Minister in the person of the Honourable Mia Mottley. Prime Minister Mia Amor Mottley is well known for many firsts. She was the first female leader of the Barbados Labour Party and of the opposition. She was also the first female Attorney General and youngest ever Queen's Counsel in Barbados. On the 25th of May of 2018, Prime Minister Mottley became the 8th Prime Minister of Barbados and the first woman to hold that post. Prime Minister Mottley attends this ceremony at the invitation of the OECS heads of government, with whom she will meet in special session to discuss matters of mutual interest to the OECS and Barbados. Please join me in welcoming Prime Minister Mottley to deliver her address.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Your Excellencies, Emmanuel Neville Senac, Governor General of St. Lucia, and Lady Senac, Honorable Alan Chasney, Prime Minister of St. Lucia, colleague heads of government, incoming Prime Minister of the OECS, the Honorable Ralph Gonzalez, the Honorable Ralph Gonzalez, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends. I first came to St. Lucia. It was my first trip alone as a child. And I came here having won a Barclays Spelling Bee competition. I wasn't yet 13 years old. It was in St. Lucia that I first attended a political meeting. I was mesmerized, in spite of the fact that it was in patois. I stayed with the Senat family, and I was in Soufrière. I spent a morning with Sir Alan Lewis, who insisted that these young girls from Queen's College stay with him and spend the morning talking with him, in spite of the fact that we were not yet teenagers. And I was impressed that a Governor General could take the time to want to engage such young minds at that stage. It is ironic that my first trip to the CARICOM region as Prime Minister of Barbados is to St. Lucia. It is equally ironic that it was also after a victory. 65 meetings for any institution is not 2 meetings. And I therefore come to my brothers and sisters here conscious that this is an institution that is mature. This is a region that has reflected in this institution the hopes and aspirations of people. And Barbados, in spite of our being outside of this institution, has been ever conscious that these are our brothers and sisters. You are our family. And I therefore come to St. Lucia this afternoon, conscious that much of what we face is common. The challenges that have confronted us are similar. But in spite of the cooperation between our people, our private sector, we have not yet seen the level of intergovernmental cooperation that matches that which our people have been engaged in at a personal level and at the level of our private sector. I believe that this opportunity that you have afforded my country is one that has to be pursued to see where it can take us. We don't know. But what we do know is that conversation and dialogue is absolutely critical in order to be the bedrock of progress as we move forward. The reality is that, as we heard just now, 2017 was a year that reminded us of our fragility. There, but for the grace of God, goes any one of us. And the only way we can move forward, conscious that we've already started another hurricane season, is by recognizing that our fragility requires of us an effort and a commitment that goes beyond anything that we have seen thus far. It is impossible for any one of us to confront the realities of climate change without cooperation. I make the point all the time that Barbados, which revels in the fact that our educational system has delivered so many over the decades, can find itself confronting issues of access tomorrow if a hurricane hit us, rather than seeking to perfect the qualitative aspects of our educational system. All of us are vulnerable. It is against that background that, irrespective of our membership in CARICOM and Caribbean community, that we must find modalities to help each other in this Caribbean region, particularly as we confront the issues of climate change and our ability to adapt to boost our resilience as we go forward. The most evident aspect of it on a day-to-day basis to our population is the movement of the Sargassum weed. We have had to confront it as you do across the rest of the region. But we believe that our best efforts are when they are cooperative. And to that extent, our ability to be able to harvest the Sargassum weed collectively and to be able to maximize what economic benefits we can get from it, rather than treating to it as a nuisance that affects our coast and our tourism industry, is the way in which we would wish to pursue discussions. Similarly, we have come to this point to recognize that these meetings mean nothing unless they bring benefit to our people. And we're conscious that whatever the modalities are for deepening cooperation between Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, we would wish to be able to ensure that we confront at all times those things that are immediate concern to our people. I am conscious that wherever I go in the Eastern Caribbean, there are those who are concerned about the manner in which they are allowed to move within our ports of entry, and in particular also my own. And that with respect to those who are traveling in transit, the inability to be able to clear immigration if you are there for longer than 2 hours continues to be of major concern to many of our citizens. It makes no sense, because it limits the extent to which those who visit our shores are capable of adding to our economic activity in our countries. And to that extent, prior to traveling here, I have asked what are the legal obstacles preventing the movement of people who are within our jurisdiction, in our ports of entry, who are in transit, but who are now being precluded from leaving the airport and the seaport. I'm yet to receive an answer that makes sense. In these circumstances, this is one of the first areas of priority that I would wish for us to discuss, because our people are precluded from doing that which is most natural. If you are in a port of entry for 6 or 8 hours, there is no reason to be treated as a prisoner of war within the precincts. Similarly, I have now to resort to the use of YouTube to be able to see what is happening in Castries or Kingstown or any other part of the Eastern Caribbean. It is not good enough. And I believe that a simple cooperative exercise, particularly now that we have the access of technology to upload and download the relevant news, that there has to be a deliberate effort Because when we start to share news and information, as I will speak to later when we go to heads of government within CARICOM as a boost for the single market and single economy, when we start to share information with each other, then we realize how we are confronting the same issues, and that many of the things that are being viewed as partisan political activity can be appropriately put in context when people realize the extent to which the challenges are similar and the options equally are just as similar. So I hope that we can treat to these issues before we come to the one that is perhaps the most intractable, but yet requires our resolution more than any other, and that is of inter-island transportation. I look forward to engaging with my colleague heads and particular fellow shareholders, and hopefully soon to be other shareholders within the context of the Act. But I do so cognizant that modalities that were relevant decades ago cannot continue to be relevant as we enter the third decade of the 21st century, and that a review of governance structures, while at the same time recognizing how we operate, is absolutely critical if we are to ensure the viability of an airline that is really the lifeblood of this region. Similarly, it is time that we stop talking about inter-island ferry transportation and do it. I am aware that unless we move to the stage where we can facilitate the movement of not just people, but the movement of vehicles and the movement of cargo, we will not get the full benefit of the space that we have the honor to occupy. In these circumstances, we have on a parallel track to assume a position of readiness for the work that must be done to facilitate that action when it comes. There must be mutual recognition of insurance. There must be mutual recognition of licenses. There must be the ability equally for us to see how far we are prepared to go for mutual recognition of domestic incorporation, such that we don't impose on our citizens the additional costs and time of having to go through all of these exercises again simply to facilitate movement within our region. These speak to a deeper functional cooperation at a time when the world will legitimately ask itself the question, what is the viable size for small states? And given the complexity of governance that small states face, how can we continue without finding deeper forms of functional cooperation to reduce the cost of government and governance to our individual states? My people in Barbados stand ready to engage in this conversation. What the modalities will be ultimately will be determined by our conversation and by our flexibility. We accept that our lead responsibility for CARICOM's single market and economy is a critical one, is as critical today as it was when the Granada's Declaration was signed again in the late 1980s. And we look forward to participating at heads of government at the end of the region, because we see the Golden Report not as pointing in a direction of despair, but one that creates the opportunities for recharging the regional movement for the purpose for which it was originally formed. We stand ready to participate in that cause, not just as a lead country for CARICOM single market and single economy in the CARICOM cabinet, but equally as a proud member of the Eastern and Southern Caribbean, which is our natural home. We are family. And as family, we must be prepared to prioritize discussions among ourselves on the things that matter most. I call it the Revolving Three. That whatever are the three most important issues to our people, let us continue to engage on them. And when we solve one, add the next one. Because in so doing, we will bring a reality of what integration must mean for our people as we move forward as those who have been given the privilege of leadership. I look forward to the caucus, and I thank you truly for affording me this opportunity in my first speech at a sub-regional or regional level to be here in St. Lucia with you, because whether in opposition or government, the people of the Eastern Caribbean have been our close brothers and sisters. I thank you, and I wish you. And I simply wish you happy OECS Day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, for your pointed remarks and for setting, in a good sense, the context for the discussions that will follow with the heads of government. Ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister Alan Chastanet, who is also Minister for Finance, Economic Growth, Job Creation, External Affairs, and the Public Service of St. Lucia, assumed chairmanship of the OECS in June 2017, just about 1 year into his term of office as Prime Minister of St. Lucia. He's also the Prime Minister with lead responsibility for sustainable development, including environment and disaster management and water, in the CARICOM quasi-cabinet. Barely 3 months after he became OECS chairman, he was faced with the task of leading a region that had been shaken by the devastation of Hurricanes Irma and Maria. He did so in a manner that combined focus, empathy, and restlessness, and demanded results. While he understood the shortcomings of our institutional mechanisms, he nevertheless pressed for change. Prime Minister Chastanet, outgoing chairman of the OECS, continues to be a regional champion on matters of climate change, and in particular on financing for resilience building to address climate change in the OECS and the wider Caribbean region. Prime Minister Chastanet, we welcome you to the podium.
Your Excellency, Sir Emmanuel Neville Snack, Governor General, and Lady Snack, colleague heads of government of OECS and member states, the Honourable Mia Mottley, Prime Minister of Barbados, it's a great ring to it, members of the Parliament of St. Lucia, the Honourable Philip J. Peer, Leader of the Parliamentary Opposition for St. Lucia, Ministers of Government of the OECS member states, members of Parliament of Barbados, the Director General of the OECS, and also the former Prime Minister of St. Lucia and the former Director of the OECS, Dr. Vaughan Lewis and Mrs. Lewis, Director General of the Eastern Caribbean Civil Aviation Authority, members of the Diplomatic Corps, Secretary to the Cabinet of the Ministers of St. Lucia, delegates to the 65th meeting of the OECS Authority, staff of the OECS Commission, specially invited guests from Barbados, former members of staff of the OECS Secretariat and Commission, representatives of the media, students, ladies and gentlemen. Before I begin my presentation, I remember a story where I was attending an event where the late George Odlum was giving a speech to commemorate the award of Derek Walcott when I think he won the Queen's Poet. And he gave a most incredible speech. I mean, singularly one of the best orators that I've met in my time. And I remember that the great artist Sir Dunstan St. Omer had to get up and speak after him. I remember Sir Dunstan was a very tall and very lanky fellow. And for a couple of minutes he was wandering around the podium and he was looking around and he looked very disturbed and finally seemed to get the courage to come to the mic. And he said, I'm reflecting on my life to find out what I did so wrong to have to deserve to come and speak after George Odlum. And so after hearing Mia speak, I feel very much like that. That a person who has only just recently been elected as Prime Minister, to be so clear and articulate with regards to what the issues are at hand, and displaying the necessary courage that we're going to need to be able to solve the problems that we have. One of my stark memories as a chairman of the OECS is the shock I experienced upon landing in Dominica and seeing the trees of the Nature Isle stripped bare and the landscape transformed into an unending mass of brown. In fact, it almost seemed like the country had been bleached. I guess the salt in the air with the whirlwind of the strong winds had literally acted like sandpaper and had bleached the trees. And there was not a leaf to be found. And for those of us who've been to Dominica and have always admired the natural beauty of Dominica, it certainly gave the impression, and it would not have been an understatement to have felt that the country had been raped. Hurricanes Irma and Maria in September of 2017 left a significant trail of death, destruction, and dislocation in a number of our member states. While the storm's fury showed nature at its worst, it also brought out the best in us as individuals, communities, nations, and institutions. And there's probably no better story than the premier of the BVI, after being so harshly devastated, sending messages to Dominica before the hurricane and after the hurricane, indicating that the BVI was prepared to give any assistance they could. Relief supplies provided by member states, friendly countries, and international agencies ranged from technical expertise, security, water, food, and critical supplies such as tarpaulins and medical care. In addition, the OECS was instrumental in supporting efforts towards food and water security, medical relief and supplies, logistics and transportation, and psychological support. I remember meeting with the General Secretary 2 days before the hurricane was to hit the BVI, and realizing that after all these years of hurricanes, an after plan in terms of countries that it would have been impacted, and we were expecting at that time that both St. Kitts and Antigua would have been severely impacted. The ability to have extracted people would have been lost because the northern islands were also going to be impacted. And so preparing Martinique, St. Lucia, and Barbados to act as the points of rescue had never been thought of. And I certainly want to thank particularly President Marie-Jean for the efforts of his country in helping with those rescue efforts. In fact, I remember that when Dominica was hit, he personally went in the plane to circle around Dominica and was the first person to arrive and handed the Prime Minister a satellite phone. That is the magnitude of the camaraderie that we had in the OECS. The road to recovery will be long for many, but goodwill and the demonstrated support of member states and the wider region and international community are a source of strong optimism. The OECS has been leading the charge towards designing and defining a comprehensive resilience framework which would underpin the work of a Caribbean Climate Smart Coalition as an accelerator. This process has been consultative to ensure that the views and expertise of all regional institutions and minds are engaged in the coalition of a truly Caribbean solution. The Caribbean Climate Smart Coalition is an initiative spearheaded by the Caribbean government leaders and supported by the private and public sector partners and multinational institutions. The accelerator brings together an unprecedented group of leaders to set out and implement a shared vision for transformative climate action in the Caribbean. It was announced at President Macron's One Planet Summit in Paris in December of 2017, in which Prime Ministers Dr. Keith Mitchell of Grenada, Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit of Dominica, and I participated along with other global private sector leaders. To date, the accelerator has garnered the support of 12 Caribbean government leaders and over 35 other partners. Regional integration is not a philosophical or academic exercise. The revised Treaty of Basse-Terre articulates specific actions by which we must reconfigure OECS member states into a single financial financial and economic space, characterized by the free movement of people, free circulation of goods, unfettered movement of capital, and the right to provide services and establish businesses. The displacement of thousands of citizens during last year's natural disasters brought home very clearly the urgency of accelerating the work necessary to bring the economic union to fruition. We cannot continue just to wait for a disaster to act. This must include the implementation of the regime governing rights contingent to free movement agreed by the authority in November of 2015. These rights go to the very heart of the single space, securing for our people non-discriminatory access to the critical social services such as education and healthcare, and the guarantee of continuity for the family unit when the principal beneficiary moves. Moreover, the treaty mandates relating to policy coordination and cooperation in significant matters such as foreign affairs, agriculture, tourism, other services, ICT, education, and health must be executed with increased vigor. It is my considered opinion that the real value of regional institutions lies in their ability to enhance the quality or reduce the cost of governance in member states. St. Lucia measures its participation in regional institutions on three basic principles. Does it improve or strengthen the institution of governance in our country? Does it reduce the cost of governance in our country? And idealistically, that it achieves both. It cannot be a talk shop. It cannot be that we talk and discuss the value of these issues and return time and time again, and we don't implement what we know in our hearts and our minds to be the way forward. It is imperative, therefore, that we examine our institutional architecture and find avenues to improve the synergies between regional and national outlook on operations. In so doing, we must encourage the participation of our citizens in creating the vision for our region and so strengthen the sense of ownership of the integration process. I'll give you a simple example. Chambers of Commerce. How often do the Chambers of Commerce of the OECS meet? I would say to you, it is more likely that a business person in St. Lucia will be familiar with business people in Miami than they would be with business people in the other OECS countries. We are not going to fulfill our mandate and the opportunities if that continues to be the practice. This is the only way in which we may be able to guarantee the success we seek and endeavor. The international political climate in which we operate has become no less hostile than the natural environment. While we have defined climate change as an existential threat, so too is the denial of ready access to ODA resulting from the graduation of our member states to middle income status, the arbitrary and unilateral blacklisting of our countries as non-cooperative tax jurisdictions, or the removal of correspondent banking arrangements. This situation is exasperated by the evident absence of the indication of the inclination to or opportunity for dialogue or the representation of our interest at the tables that truly matter. All too often, we as small states are invited to meetings in which we're literally given 3 minutes to make a presentation, as if that is to satisfy us. And then we are further insulted because they don't even listen to what you say. They believe that the fact that they've just given you the opportunity to note down your interest, but nobody's really taking you on. This is only going to change through a collaborative effort. This situation is exasperated by the evident absence of the inclination to or opportunity for dialogue or the representation of our interest at the tables that truly matter. And I repeat that. In these circumstances, I urge that we revisit the relationships with our current partners and agree on the means by which they may be enhanced to our mutual benefit. Simultaneously, we must be assertive internationally, extending our outreach to new partners who pursue objectives and espouse principles that are consistent with those of the OECS, and take cognizance of one peculiar characteristic and needs of small island developing states. Our agenda for the 65th meeting provides us with an opportunity to address these pressing matters. It covers a wide range of issues for international relations to climate change responses and the operation of our regional institutions. The annual work program and budget of our Commission will also be discussed in order to ensure that the objectives of the organization are articulated and programmed in a particular and achievable manner. I thank the Director General of the OECS and the hard-working staff of the Commission for their services to date and their support during my chairmanship. I look forward to the consolidation of the work of the organization has done and to date and greater progress on the integration agenda as we move into the future. From time to time, the authority has the honor of sharing time with special friends. The OECS and Barbados have had a long-standing relationship, and so has the Prime Minister with many of us. I extend my very warm welcome to the Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honourable Mia Mottley, who has been invited to participate in the deliberations with heads of government. Among other matters, we will exchange views on regional and international issues of common concern and explore avenues for increased cooperation between the OECS and Barbados. I look forward to, with great anticipation, to this engagement. And Prime Minister, if I can maybe share a story with you, because once upon a time, despite what I look like today, I actually played basketball. And I remember taking a flight from St. Lucia to go and play in an OECS tournament in Grenada. And on the way down, we took the route where we flew through St. Vincent, and then we went to Union Island, and I think we went to Carriacou, and then eventually to, it was to Canawan, and no, Carriacou, and then to Grenada. And I remember the fright in the eyes of the other basketball players with me, who begged that we do not go back home on that same route. So we were able to change our flight, and instead we had to go through Barbados. And we arrived in Barbados early in the morning, and we had a 9-hour layover, exactly how you had described, and they had told us that we could not leave the airport. So I decided to get the guys to have a basketball practice in the arrivals hall. And after about 15 minutes, they came over to me and said, "Look, we'll be able to get you out." So the point of the story is not the genius of my creativity, but the point of the story is that when the technocrats want to find a solution, they can. So I agree with you, Madam Prime Minister. This nonsense must stop. And I, too, on many of occasions, have been confronted with asking people, why are we doing this? And clearly not being satisfied with what the answer is. And I think as leaders, the public are no longer patient to understand the reasons why. And they're looking to us to make sure we make those changes. Colleague heads of government, I welcome you all to St. Lucia. I want to express my deepest gratitude for your support during my tenure. In 2017 and 2018 period, I dare say, unprecedented in terms of the challenges which our region confronted. Our mettle was tested, and we proved our ability to stand. Prime Minister Gonzalez, you can rely on my support and continued commitment to the attainment of the goals of the OECS. As we tackle our agenda in caucus and plenary sessions, I look forward to full and frank conversations amongst all on the matters which we agree, as well as those of which our views diverge. This is necessary if we are to maintain and enhance our sense of community while appreciating our individual sovereignty. Above all, we must keep in focus our duty, ultimately, and to act always for the benefit of the people of the OECS. Welcome all of you to St. Lucia.
Thank you, Prime Minister Chasney, for your usual very candid remarks. I believe I can speak for the people of the OECS region.